Sword Art Online, Progressive, 007, Rhapsody of a Crimson Heart, Part 1. Written by Reki Kawahara. Illustrations by Abec. Design by BP. Translated by Stephen Paul. Read by Mae Zurita. 7th floor of grad, January 2023. 1. It's hot! That was the first thought that escaped the lips of my current combat partner upon teleporting to the 7th floor. So hot! She repeated for emphasis, scowling upward. For structural reasons, we couldn't see the blue sky or the sun itself, but the light that radiated down from the bottom of the floor above us was undeniably stronger here than on the 6th floor. It's supposed to be midwinter here, so why is it so hot? In fact, when we stopped for a bit last night, wasn't it a lot cooler than this? She asked, turning back to me. I shrugged. I feel like I mentioned somewhere along the way that it depends on the specific floor whether they model the real world season or not. This one probably just ignores the season entirely. It was cold last night, but it wasn't cold, right? I know, but it's January 5th. It feels like it's 81 degrees here, she said, an oddly specific number to quote. Elsewhere, around the teleport square, there was only a handful of other players, but all the same, she hurried over to the shade of a broadleaf trees at the edge, then opened her player menu. After a quick manipulation of her equipment mannequin, she removed her red hooded cape. Underneath it were a thin breastplate and a leather skirt that stopped just above the knees. With a shake of her lustrous chestnut brown hair and an equally long sigh, my partner, the level 21 fencer, Asuna, looked me over with a grimace. Kirito, why don't you take that coat off? It's making me sweat just looking at it. I don't know, I said, looking down at my avatar. Your hooded cape is more or less a cosmetic item, but my coat is my primary source of armor. If I take this off, I'll lose most of my defense. Not in the safety of town, you won't. True. Logically, she was correct, but the memory of being attacked by an NPC assassin in the midst of the 6th floor town was still fresh in my mind. I at least wanted to stay fully equipped outdoors, but it was true that the interior of my black leather coat was rising on the sweat index. The town attack was part of a forced event, so I shouldn't have to worry about it happening again, I told myself, and I went into my menu to return the coat of midnight to my inventory. Underneath, I wore a breastplate similar to Asuna's, a thin and long pants. That would be much cooler to wear, I thought. Doesn't really change much, murmured the fencer, staring me down. I think it's all the black thing. Just looks hot. Don't you ever feel like wearing a different color, Mr. Black? Well, you've been wearing red since I first met you, I argued back. Asuna glanced at the red tunic she was wearing and looked up with a smirk. I wear other colors here and there. Oh, do you? When I'm relaxing at the inn, yes. But we're outside. I have no choice. I have to wear what gives me the best defense. Yeah, well, that's what I was saying, I argued. But the truth was, defensive numbers weren't the only reason I wore nothing but black. My main coat was the last hit bonus prize for beating the 1st floor boss, so the color wasn't my choice, but the shirt and pants were regular store-bought clothes, and I could choose a different look if I felt like it. Technically, I could claim another practical reason that dark-colored gear offered a bonus to hiding, but that could also backfire, depending on the terrain and brightness. I'd chosen dark blue when I created my character, and I didn't consider to have always been enamored with black or anything like that. Maybe there was some connection to the fact that my middle school uniform was the stuffy traditional gakoren, a long-sleeved, high-collared jacket that made me feel comfortable in dark colors. I was pondering this very belated topic when Asuna snuck up and patted me on the back. Well, I'd feel weird if you started wearing white or orange, so I guess I'll put up with you looking sweaty. Anyway, let's get moving. Moving where? It's our first time being in this town, right? Well, second, but obviously I'm talking about lunch. Do you have any recs? Let's see. I blinked, turned to survey the square. Lectio was the main town of the 7th floor. Had a very orthodox design by the standards of Grad. By the edges of the teleporter square were homes and shops built from stone, wood, plaster, and the half-timbered style. In contrast to the board game-like town of a 6th floor, Stachin, the roads leading outward from the circular plaza here were complex and confusing. I spent several days based out of this town during the beta test. I tried to out a number of restaurants in that time, of course, but my memory of them was oddly faint. Lectio. The best dish of Lectio was... I tried to summon my memories, but they were proving stubborn. It was as though someone had clapped a lid on my mind. I gasped, realizing why my memories of this place were hazy. I was the one who put that lid on them. It was a place where I'd experienced great sadness. Recalling those tragic memories was the icebreaker that made them all come flooding back in miserable detail. But for now, I let them run off into a side tributary and focused on Asuna's question. Sadly, there wasn't really anything in the beta that I'd call a great specialty here. For one thing, Lectio isn't the main encampment of the 7th floor. Huh? But it's the main town, isn't it? On paper, yes. Anyway, I can explain that part later. Let's get to a restaurant first. I think that one over there sells pita-ish sandwiches. The one in that direction has a chicken-ish rice, and the one that way serves some spicy-ish stew. What's up with all the ish foods? Asuna asked suspiciously. Then she followed it up with, when you say chicken and rice, is that the Japanese style or the Singaporean style? Huh? What's the difference? Japanese-style chicken and rice is kind of like omu rice. It's basically fried rice with chicken, flavored with ketchup. Singapore-style chicken is thin-sliced poached chicken over ginger-flavored rice. It's called Hainan chicken, or Kyoman gai, she explained smoothly. I just stared at her. When I met her on the 1st floor, she said stuff like, I didn't come to this town to go eat good food. But now that we'd been working together all the way up to the 7th floor, I couldn't say with certainty that Asuna's knowledge of food outclassed the average SAO player by far. I would have thought that meant she liked to cook food as much as she enjoyed eating it, but the 5 skills Asuna currently owned were rapiers, light metal armor, tailoring, sprinting, and likely 2-handed lances. It was too early to have 2 crafting skills at this point, but why did she pick tailoring instead of cooking? And why was she working on 2-handed lances, a skill with hardly any use for her? We'd been partners for over a month at this point, but there were still so many things I didn't know about her. I realized it was probably more on the Singaporean side. I don't remember if the rice was ginger flavored though. Why are you so fuzzy on this one? Regardless, let's go to that one. You like Hanan gai? You're mixing them up. It's Hanan chicken or Kyoman gai. She snipped. Then she added, it's not me, it's my family that likes it. I just felt like having it since it's been a while. Oh. I grinned to hide my surprise. It was extremely rare for Asuna to speak about her real family. The last time I could remember her doing so was in Yofil Castle on the 4th floor, when she told me that her Christmases on the other side were spent eating cake all alone, waiting for her father and mother to come back home. Be that as it may, I had no problem with having chicken and rice for our first meal on the 7th floor. "Let's go then. Right this way, madam," I offered, bowing obsequiously and pointing an upturned hand in the right direction. Asuna sniffed smugly and took the lead. We headed down a path southwest from the teleport square, and following vague memories, turned right once and left once. A pleasant smell hung in the air. Asuna's nose started to twitching, and she smiled. "Yes, this does have the smell of some proper chicken and rice." "Just don't expect the exact thing," I replied, although my hunger gauge was nearly at its maximum, too. The Irrational Cube boss of the 6th floor went down around 11 o'clock last night. Asa and I went up the staircase from the boss chamber to the 7th floor and activated the teleporter gate in the main town there, then returned to Station to escort the NPCs Theano and Maya home after their help in the fight. We stayed at an inn in Station because we were utterly exhausted, and I slept a dead, dreamless sleep until 9 in the morning. The bulk of the frontline players would have been busy working on the 7th floor by then, so we spent an hour relaxing around the place before checking out, then teleported back to Lectio through the gate. So looking backward, the last time I ate anything was before entering the 6th floor labyrinth tower. That had only been an informal meal of a donor sandwich from a cart. I couldn't even remember the last time we sat down and took our time eating at a table. Clearly, she was thinking the same thing, because Asuna's pace picked up as we rounded the last corner and came to the restaurant on the right side. It was a very simple business with a round wooden sign hanging over the open doors. The relief carving on the sign said, in English, "Min's Eatery." Min's Eatery? What's an eatery? I asked, unfamiliar with the word. Asuna explained. "It's like a casual restaurant or a cafe. This place looks small. I hope there's an open table." Her prayers were answered. There was no one in the place. It was a bit too early for lunch, and the way to get here was convoluted and out of the way, so if I had to guess, I'd say hardly any player knew this even existed yet. The smaller scale eatery term was accurate. There were 6 spots on the counter and a pair of tables for 2. Nothing more. We sat down at one of the tables, and before we could even look at the menu, a voice behind the counter bellowed, "Welcome. What will it be?" Hey, give us a second. I protested at the plump woman there, whom I took to be Min herself. I opened the wooden menu on the table so we could look at it. As a general rule, the menus and signs for NPC shops in Grad were written in English. At first, I found it difficult to read and decipher them, but over time, you started to figure it out. Or at least get used to the concept. And so lately, I felt like just glancing over the letters was enough for me to tell what they were. Maybe. Fortunately, the folding menu only had 2 starters, 2 main dishes, and 4 drinks. At a glance, the 2 starters looked like salad and soup, and both of the main dishes were rice-based. One was chicken, as I remembered, and the other one looked like basil rice. Both dishes were 40 kol for a large portion and 30 for a regular size. That was a reasonable price for the 7th floor, considering it was meant to be a light meal. However, basil rice? Is that the same basil that comes on pizzas and stuff? I would assume so. It's spelled the same, agreed Asuna. Under my breath, I complained. But basil's just a leaf. They're going to charge the same price for leaves and rice as they do for chicken and rice? That's crazy. I don't know why you're complaining to me. Ah! She blinked with surprise, then smiled. I get it. I don't think this is just leaves on rice. It must be kafao. Kafao? I've heard of it before, I wondered. She patiently explained, I was just telling you that the name of Singaporean chicken and rice is khao man gai, right? That comes from Thai, and the 2 biggest rice dishes in Thailand are khao man gai and kafao. Oh, so what is kafao? It's often just called kafao rice in Japan. You stir-fry chicken or pork with basil, then serve it with rice. Oh, I don't think this place served that during the beta, though. Maybe the owner went to study in Thailand before the game launched, she said, with a very serious expression. I couldn't tell if she was joking. Asuna then sighed and said, I can't keep waiting. If you don't decide what to order in the next 5 seconds, I'm making the decision. Wait a second, I cried, staring at the two items on the menu. Do I go with the safe choice of chicken and rice, or live on the wild side and try the unknown kafao rice? I let myself waver for 4 seconds until inspiration struck. Wanna order both and share them? That's a good idea, agreed Asuna. Then she added quietly, make them both larges. That time spent studying in Thailand must have served her well, because Min's chicken rice and kafao rice left nothing to be desired. Maybe the secret sauce of coming in absolutely famished helped, but I was certain that the chicken was nothing at all like the beta test dish of simple boiled chicken on rice. The kafao rice was a new taste for me, spicy and delicious. Asa and I finished off our shared dishes in less than 3 minutes, washed it down with a vanilla-scented tea, and sighed with great satisfaction. Hey. You said this town wasn't really famous for any food. I'd say this was quite the find, wouldn't you? Asuna asked, arching her eyebrow. I replied with what I'd been thinking about as I ate. It wasn't this good in the beta. It was like dry, lonely rice, underwhelming pieces of chicken. But it was definitely rice, right? Isn't this the first place in Einkrad we've seen that sells proper rice dish? Oh, she might have been right about that. I'd eaten some porridge gruel in the Dark Elf camp on the 3rd floor, but that was closer to barley boiled in sweet milk with nuts, dried fruit, and sprinkled on top. I wouldn't have called that a rice dish by any means. I think you're right, I said, but the rice here is long grain rice, isn't it? That's good too, but it doesn't give you that good ricey feeling after a full meal that short grain rice does. How do you know about long grain and short grain rice, but have never heard of khao man gai or kafrao? Asuna asked in disbelief. Because I went on a field trip in elementary school to try out planting rice in a paddy. Oh, that's nice. When did you get to do that? Although I did go catching bugs in a paddy once, Asuna said with a smile. She quickly composed herself and cleared her throat, feeling like she'd been talking too much about the real world. At any rate, she continued, this was really delicious. Thank you for showing me this wonderful place. You're welcome. Doesn't feel like we're celebrating a New Year meal, though. First of all, it's already January 5th, and it's sweltering outside. They could serve a traditional New Year's dish here, and it still wouldn't feel right, she said, with a shrug, finishing her iced tea and looking out the window. The interior had good ventilation, so it was fairly cool, but the sunlight flooding through the noontime window was full and suffocating as midsummer day. Because the beta test had occurred in August, every floor felt warm and summery, but none had been so bad that it felt uncomfortable. Maybe the heat of the 7th floor had been amped up, just like the flavor of the chicken and rice here. If so, given how unpleasant it already was for Asuna and me in our light armor, it was going to be hell for the tank players decked out in full metal plate armor. The same could be said for the Dark Elves, who didn't seem to enjoy the heat. Asuna was thinking the same thing. I hope Kismel's all right, she murmured. Well, it might be hot here, but there's plenty of greenery and water. I don't think she'll have much trouble as in the dusty desert of the 6th floor, I explained. The fencer looked surprised by my comment. No, I'm not talking about the heat. I mean about the keys. Oh, right. That should have been my primary concern. Asuna and I were in the midst of the Elf War questline. On the side of the Dark Elves, we helped Kismel, the Knight of Lysula, with a sequence that saw us recovering one of the sacred keys on each floor. We'd found the Jade Key on the 3rd floor, the Lapis Key on the 4th floor, the Amber Key on the 5th, and the Agate Key on the 6th floor, with the 2 remaining. But unforeseen event had caused all 4 sacred keys to fall into the hands of Kaisara, the adjutant of the enemy fallen elves. The big problem was it was unlikely to have been pre-programmed part of the questline. There was a gang of player killers out there in Aincrad, led by a mysterious man in a black poncho. At some point, they joined up with the Fallen and helped them steal the key. All 6 keys were recoverable in the beta test, but we just lost them all partway through. This couldn't have been part of the original quest line story because it happened through the interference of another player. We parted ways with Kismel just after it happened on the 6th floor. Kaisara broke her favorite saber, but I'd offered her an elven stout sword as replacement. It was my backup weapon. So I wanted to believe that our connection wasn't permanently served. But Kismel had to report to the Dark Elf High Priestess or some other important figure to explain how she lost their sacred key. There was a price to be paid for her failure. Hoping to cheer Asuna up, I did my very best to enunciate loudly and clearly. Remember what Kismel said when we left her? I am the one of the Queen's own Royal Pagoda Knights. Only Her Majesty and the Knight Commander have the right to formally rebook me. I'm sure she'll be fine once we get started on the next chapter of the quest on this floor. We'll see her soon after. Rebuke? What? It's rebuke, not rebook. It means to punish someone for their failure. Asuna explained, her worry replaced by annoyance. She exhaled and looked me in the eyes. Yes, you're right. If I have enough time to sit around moping, it would be better spent doing something. Now that we're full again, shall we get started on the 7th floor? My temporary partner extended her fist across the table. I smirked. You bet. First things first, though, we gotta upgrade our equipment. I pounded her knuckles, and we got to our feet.